Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
And good morning again. Welcome to All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. I'm Sanchez. We start this morning with the unemployment crisis here in the state of Indiana. Our IT mate has spent weeks trying to get answers to your questions. Now, we finally have them. Here's the latest. Federal pandemic unemployment benefits have restarted. People will receive back pay from when the program stopped last month. That's the extra $300 per week plus expanding payments beyond 26 weeks and to include self-employed and gig workers. This is the result of a court order. The department's commissioner, Fred Payne, explained the process.
The process that we went through to end up starting payments or restarting payments began when the judge's order came out and we reached out to the U.S. Department of Labor. Because the decision requested or stated that we should not stop the program, again, the program had already been stopped. So at that point, we did not even have the ability to draw down federal funding. So we had to make sure that we were engaged with the USDOL. So we went through a series of discussions with the USDOL to make sure that we could effectuate the judge's order. And that's what took some time going back and forth. And so to restart it, it did take, some IT lifts. There are some administrative things that we had to go through. And again, I think we started back up, 2 days ago with vouchers being ready for individuals.
Meanwhile, some of those who are unemployed have told IT Made about having to wait weeks or even months to get benefits. Commissioner Payne explained why that may be the case.
We do want to make sure that we're paying every eligible Hoosier. That is our goal, and that is what we'll continue to do. Now, in terms of someone waiting 6 months or more, that population is extremely small. So we have processed more than 90-something% of the claims that have come through our shop. So more than 90%. If there's someone who's waiting beyond 21 days, there are some complications with their matter. So we're going to continue to work through those, and we're going to give them the attention that they need. And if they're eligible, they will receive the benefits that they are eligible for. I don't know if you want to pick up on some more of that.
Sure. So, you mentioned the word backlog. I'd say we do not have a backlog. As claims come in, we are processing those claims in the timeframes that we were pre-pandemic. The ones that take longer, that might get beyond the 21 days, are those where we have an employer involved and they're protesting, and we have to give due process to both the claimant and the employer. So we have to give them both an opportunity to tell us their side of the story. Also, ones where we have indicators of fraud. We get lots of information from lots of different sources, employers being one of them, and when we get that information, we have to then act upon that information.
And one I want to make sure I expound on the answer. And when we talk about, the appeals piece, just want to make sure we put in context. Our appeals process right now, we do have, quite a high volume. But our appeals right now, we're about, 12 to 18 weeks?
So we are on PUA claims. We're actually a little bit lower than that. We're back to sort of pre-pandemic timeframes for the PUA program. Those are a little bit easier appeals. There's one party involved. There's not an employer. The issues aren't as complex. For our regular UI program, depending on the issue type, those appeals are taking longer.
Payne says one reason claims are taking so long, fraud.
I'm still amazed about the scope and the persistence of this culprit of fraud. We've implemented a variety of measures to block and to avoid fraudulent payments going out. We know that, unfortunately, some of these necessary measures have caused inconvenience and delay to some legitimate claimants. But I want to take a moment here this morning to share with you just where we are and how things have gone. We enhanced our identity verification processes back in the summer of 2020, and we've continued to enhance them since that time. To date, about 27% of individuals who've attempted to verify their identity through ID.me, who is our vendor that we use to verify identification, have been found to be fraudulent. Additionally, we've multiple cross matches in place with our data that we use with other states to see if an individual is filing for unemployment benefits in more than one state. Now, we're also using technology that allows us to both track and prevent attacks to our system by sophisticated bots. Since November of 2020, our IT system has blocked more than 26 million attempts to use bots to attack and penetrate our unemployment system. Now, while no measure is foolproof, we've been able to avoid a lot of fraud penetration.
Now, one of the biggest issues that ITmate has uncovered, unemployed Hoosiers being told to repay thousands of dollars they got in unemployment benefits. ITmate has learned the state does have an overpayment waiver request form. It allows you to ask the state to skip paying back unemployment benefits. The state says if a claimant appeals or if they request a waiver, there will be no attempts to collect overpayment until those processes are resolved. ITmate's Jasmine Miner addressed the repayment concerns with the commissioner. Listen.
My questions is more focused on the repayment process. So we've heard from, over 800 people claiming that they are having to repay in full their unemployment benefits. And these are not people that are saying it was fraud. They're saying they got their documents in on time, they met their deadlines, and yet they're still having to pay some tens of thousands of dollars. So I just want to get a very clear answer from you guys is, are you going to waive those who were eligible for their unemployment benefits, got everything in on their deadline, got all their documents in, but are still saying, getting that letter that they have to pay $10,000, $11,000 back?
Yes, if there's an individual who received overpayment and they've provided us with a waiver or they've appealed it, we've stopped any type of attempts, okay? So individuals who have legitimately provided us with documentation and they filled out the waiver, the answer to the question is generally no. Now, I can't comment on a specific matter because if a specific individual has some fact-intensive issues that throws off everything I just said, then that's a little bit different. But each one of those cases would be handled on a fact-by-fact basis. But generally speaking, if there is a legitimate overpayment and it falls within one of our waiver provisions, then that person will not be asked or be required to pay back any money.
Does there need to be some clarification from the department? A lot of people who filed for unemployment last year did it for the very first time. And we've heard from people who one small error in their documents or their filling out their forms caused them to either lose an appeal or have to be forced to pay quite a bit of money, sometimes an entire year's salary of what they actually made. So is there something that needs to be done where people can really understand what is exactly needed so that they do not have to pay that kind of money?
Sure. We're always refining our processes, and we do take suggestions from the public on all of that. But again, if an individual has made a simple mistake in terms of, and we can verify that it's not fraud, then there's a process in place for that, and we'll continue to follow that process. We want to make sure that when we're going after overpayments, we only want to go after overpayments that, people did not legitimately receive. So we're not in the business of trying to be, overly burdensome to individuals. And we do know that we can continue to refine our processes and to make those easier for individuals, and we'll continue to do that. And any information that you have that could help us do that, we'd appreciate it.
Regina, question for you. You mentioned the waiver system that's been in place for a while, but when I looked at the back of some of the repayment letters and I saw that description of the waiver system, it doesn't specifically say pandemic unemployment. So is that something that you guys are going to clarify with people? Because I think a lot of people didn't realize they could also too file to have their pandemic unemployment waived.
So if you look at the form you're looking at, the notice of repayment, you'll see up in the corner it says claim type, and so it would say PUA. So that they're getting that for the PUA program. But we understand that sometimes the government is not easily understood, so we can absolutely do some clarifications on that.
And we've posted the waiver request form on our website. Just head to wishtv.com. Look for the As Seen on Wish TV section at the top of the homepage. Coming up, the unemployment appeals process. What you need to know if a waiver is denied and you're heading before a judge. Welcome back. We want to help give you some help in this unemployment process. ITMate's Jasmine Miner took our stack of 700 complaints to one local attorney who says one of the best things you can do to win an appeal is to keep your receipts.
Other person over $10,000. Another person says, I'm frantic, wondering how I'm going to survive on what I bring home a month. I mean, this is really stressful.
What I'm hearing is anywhere from $3,000 on the low end to $33,000 on the high end. You can hear it through the phone, their anxiety and their frustration with the system.
Employment attorney Shannon Melton says his firm, John Haskin Associates, will typically step in for the appeal process. And he says he's seen the state make several mistakes.
Why are people having to repay?
The thing I can think of is maybe a personnel shortage at the beginning of all this and pushing claims through without doing full investigations.
Whatever the case, Shannon's had big success in winning appeals.
Person was $19,000. So I mean, we're not talking about, minuscule amounts of money. We're talking about, for some people after taxes, it's their entire paycheck.
So what can you do? Shannon says pay attention to your correspondence. Check your portal every day because you only get 10 to 15 days to file for an appeal and get your documents in.
You miss that deadline, you're pretty much out of luck. If you cannot hire an attorney, try to write the best appeal that you can.
And he says when you finally get a court date, the hearing will usually be done over the phone.
Don't let that phone call go by. Or definitely had those phone calls where they missed the phone call and then it came out against them.
What do you want to see from the state?
Make the determination that this was a really bad event. It was nationwide, global-wide issue, and maybe cut people a break.
In the meantime, anyone who has to repay when it comes to sending in documents.
If you're sending it by fax, make sure to keep that success sheet or, go sheet or whatever.
Keep the receipts.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way to force the state to go faster on these things. Don't give up. That's what we've told people several times. Don't give up.
That was Jasmine Miner reporting. If you look closely at your repayment letter, there is a waiver on the back, but it does not specifically address pandemic unemployment benefits. Shannon says that it's still worth trying to get waived for pandemic unemployment. Adding bipartisan to the president's bipartisan infrastructure plan, one Republican Indiana mayor explains why he supports the bill. That's next on All Indiana Politics. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics. We turn now to the new effort to show bipartisanship in President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure plan. The White House this week released a letter signed by 369 mayors from around the country. The letter strongly urges Congress to pass the infrastructure framework, which calls for spending $1.2 trillion over the next decade. 6 mayors from Indiana signed it, including Democrat mayors in Indianapolis, Bloomington, Gary, and Fort Wayne, and 2 Republicans, the mayors of Carmel and Lawrence. And we welcome in Lawrence Mayor Steve Collier now. Mr. Mayor, good to see you. Thank you for chatting with us today. First off, let's start with this letter that you signed. You're one of 6 Indiana mayors to sign it out of more than 300 across the country. Why?
Well, as earlier, I think that for me, we worked pretty hard going back even early in the year to make sure that the city of Lawrence this time around was going to be included in some of the called ARP money now, but there was CARES Act back in, of course, in 2020. What I discovered over the course of my own research was that the excluded cities of Indianapolis had been literally didn't make the list of cities that would have been deserving of some of the distribution money. So our first hurdle was to work with Speedway and Beech Grove and Southport to make sure that our names made the list. And that was truly a bipartisan effort because we had Senator Youngs and Braun, along with Representative Sparks and Carson, who all signed on a letter that sent directly to Janet Yellen to include the excluded cities as a part of the non-entitled version of it. So that was the first hurdle we had to get to. The second one was understanding exactly what it was the Biden administration was trying to do with the ARP funding. And I will tell you that there's no question that cities throughout the nation are concentrating necessarily so on infrastructure improvements. So anything that was going to provide an avenue for us to be able to certainly protect and preserve and to extend my city was something that I was going to be in favor of. So the idea about it being a bipartisan vote, certainly I support that, and I support bipartisanship. I think you see that a lot at the local level, perhaps more so at the national level. But it wasn't a tough decision to exhibit that, and I think that certainly I can guarantee you that we will be able to spend the money on the where sports tend to be spent.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that in a moment. I just want to kind of ask you this one. You're one of two Republicans, Carmel Mayor Jim Brainerd being the other one from across the state, to sign on to this. Have you gotten any pushback from your party?
Not at all, actually. I was at a big fundraiser last night and didn't hear a word about it. I think in some respects, maybe they weren't quite, in touch with. This is the National Conference of Mayors, so many of the mayors in Indiana maybe aren't on that list. It is for cities of 50,000 or above, so that eliminates quite a few of the cities in Indiana. But I think most of them, had they been given a chance or had they looked at it, probably would have done the same thing that I did. Certainly proud of the fact that we're a part of it, and I'm happy to see that people are viewing this as a bipartisan effort. There's no question that we need to have more of that going on throughout the state, certainly and certainly in Indiana and across the nation.
Yeah. So let's get back to your earlier point. What will the money, if it's granted to you, what will it be spent on?
It's pretty directed, actually, and that's what I like about it. There are only certain things that the money can be spent on. It's not just a grant of money that you can spend on whatever you want to spend it on. It's pretty much dedicated to infrastructure and loss of revenue. In our case, in the city of Lawrence case, we'll spend a lot of the money on water and sewer main replacement, extending our water supply. All of our water comes out of the ground. We will do some paving. We lost about $500,000 in revenue from the MVH funding, so we'll replace that. Other than that, I mean, we'll see. We're coming up with a financial plan, and we have to present that to my council about what we're going to spend it on. I'm working with engineers right now to determine where it is we'll spend that money. It comes in two trenches, so you'll get half in 2021 and half in 2022. Got to have it spent by 2024. So it's relatively easy to find what we need to spend it on. We just have to find it to spend it on things that we're going to help the city to the greatest extent possible.
What do you say to the critics, and this is my last question here, the critics, many of whom are in your party, that say $1 trillion, more than $1 trillion, how are we going to pay that back?
Well, that's a tough issue to answer. I think one of the things that we have to look at is that assets versus debt. And I think that when we look at the United States, you look at the amount of money being produced or printed right now, who will pay that back? And I think that if there's a good place to invest money like that, there's no better place than investing in the things that will provide services and better services for the citizens of your community. So I don't really view this as being money that's kind of being printed and then just being kind of frittered away. This is very directed toward projects that are going to assist my citizens especially, and all citizens for that matter, in things that are going to make their quality of life that much better.
To that point, would you also consider this an investment and maybe even a money-making investment in the sense that if you have better infrastructure, more people come into the community, more people spend money, right?
Yeah, there's no question and that's a great observation because one of the things that citizens look for when they're moving into communities, and of course as a mayor, I'm trying to drive as many people as I can into my community. So the better your infrastructure is, the better your water production is and your sewer and everything else, the better that is, the more attractive your community becomes. And so then I begin to attract people into my community. Yeah. We are right at the cusp of that 50,000 mark. We think we'll probably jump over that, and that'll be certainly one avenue, one proof of the fact that this kind of investment is going to lead to a better and a more successful community.
Mayor Collier, again, thank you for chatting with us today. We appreciate it. Take care. Meanwhile, not all Indiana Republicans support the plan. Congressman Jim Banks, who also heads the Republican Study Committee in the House, has been a leading voice opposed to the plan. He spent the past 2 months urging his colleagues to tie the president's spending plans to inflation and rising prices. A report this week showed prices in June rose 6% over last year, the highest year-to-year jump since 2008. Now, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, though, has indicated that he hopes to force a vote on the infrastructure bill this week, even though the bill still has yet to be written.
Take All Indiana Politics on the go with you. Download our podcast now. Part of the All Indiana Podcast Network and allindianapodcastnetwork.com.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. You can also find our brand new All Indiana Politics podcast as well.